And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to the Valley of the Judged. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and with me, I have two of my good brothers and sisters here in the temple. We have the Master of the Wanderer's Library and the man who hates the jungle puzzles as much as I do. Good brother Sig.
That jungle puzzle in Kingdom Hearts is bullshit.
Mm-hmm. And our resident dragon kitten who had to deal with being assaulted by her own cats once again. Good sister Tabby.
He's asleep in my lap. He's not attacking me yet.
Yep, and now, I was planning originally on doing this last week, but because of IRL issues, there was a bit of shuffling about, which is why we did Fated Continuum last Friday. Obviously, unless one of us goes down for the count again, Fated Continuum will be back on the Sunday slot, and the week after we'll be finally delving into the mechanics of Anima.
Yes.
And I'll probably be taking some pot shots at William SRD for comparing this to Warhammer 40k, specifically Imperium Maledictum, which is a role under D100 system. It's just one of those things where some people are wrong and need to be reminded of that. But
right,
SOAR, Shirtless on a Rooftop, which I was going to use the full title, but if I did that, then YouTube and Twitch would get mad at me for hitting character limits.
Because of course.
So this is an RPG that is very much channeling beat-em-ups like Double Dragon, Streets of Rage, and Final Fight in what it calls a slash of life. And we will be getting into that in both the core book as well as the city guide. Though, because of the way this kind of thing works, the city guide won't be getting as much attention, since it's the same reason I don't give a whole lot of time towards GM guides in this particular series. Because a lot of times there's not a whole lot to really say.
Yeah, it's usually just iterating on the same stuff, but just with a little expanded stuff for game masters.
Yep. So, first off, I had to do a bit of finagling to... So, the reason why I have it set up this way is because, as they say here, real SOARers read in spreads. And I will note in advance that this is still a work in progress, so you're going to see a bunch of artwork here spots. Just something to keep in mind. But it is close enough to where it needs to be. So we have a bit of a foreword talking about how it's inspired by beat-em-ups, crime shows, and what's in the playtest is everything to run a few sessions at least. It is lacking some playbooks, some foes, some gear, and a few quirks, but what's here is good enough to play with. And this is the 0.9 version. So first we have what is a role-playing game, which normally I skim these over, but I like this part here. A TTRPG system is a dinner with its own table manners. The system here is about telling you what those table manners are. And using a nice bowl of ramen as the example, where's the egg? We got peppers.
That's the only thing missing. You got everything else, but no egg. That's disgraceful.
Ow! The cat woke up.
And they left the bay leaf in there. You don't leave the bay leaf in there once it's all done.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, chef brain kicking in.
Yeah. I do like that we have a distinction of what the game is and isn't. This is something that I'm glad to see more of. We saw this early on with Draw Steel.
Mm-hmm.
But SOAR is the Brawl. Features tactical grid-based tactical combat that has fast turns. The turn helps streamline decisions. Focus on force movement and environmental collisions. Unique styles of combats. Foes made to be used in large groups with fast turns to compensate. Slash of life. Mm-hmm. SOAR has a system for anything outside of brawls that puts a focus on flawed characters you're encouraged to play the flaws of. A system that separates success and how well you succeed. A focus on growing familiar with the city you're in and forming connections, as well as knowing which restaurant is worth it and which isn't. And evocative playbooks that focus on character archetypes and giving you a place in the world you live in. SOAR isn't a generic system for any story. It's rooted in crime drama. That's good. I know some people will do the whole, oh, what? I use my own setting. As I said before, no, you don't. You have a bunch of ideas you have a bunch of scattered ideas, but you don't have a setting. And whenever someone does the whole, oh, I just use my own setting, I'm like, then why are you using something that has a specific setting in mind? Like I've seen that with with a few folk wanting to try and do like Mystara or the like in Sword World 1.0, and I'm like, why?
Why?
Like you're just giving yourself more work than is necessary.
Raxia and Mystara are two completely different things.
Well, I said Sword World 1.0, but for Celia.
Or Facelia. Yeah.
But same principle still applies. And it could be any of the other original D&D settings, and the rules would still apply, especially when it comes to things like magic.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's that age-old fallacy of thinking that one system can handle everything. And truth be told,
something I've seen a lot of.
Mm-hmm. I am not. I know it might be tempting for someone to think, "Oh, you just hate generic systems." I don't.
No.
What I hate is when a system that isn't generic is treated like it is, and vice versa. Oh, that was what I tried to make clear when it came to Fabula Ultima, which drove me to drink after revisiting that.
It gave me a headache, and I just went to bed after that. It was like, how do you make something this awful?
Mm-hmm. When I finish that document, I'll probably ask you to write a excerpt just giving your take.
Oh, God. All right, but I ain't gonna be nice about it.
Neither was I.
Fair enough.
SOAR is also not a game that believes combat is a fail state. Combat in SOAR is in fact one of the main draws. That is fair. Now, I typically run
RPG.
Yeah. This is a beat 'em up RPG, so if you're mad that so much of it revolves around combat, which I have seen with how some people approach games, it's a question of why are you picking this game? For whatever reason,
explore the human element of things.
for whatever reason, there is this weird mindset that combat should be treated as a failsafe, or if a game is heavily favoring combat, then it is some sort of failure of design. It is only a failure of design if the game claims that it isn't doing that, but in practice is. Uh, but then we get into why it's called Slash of Life thing. Because unlike the slice of life genre, it is raw, is about people living their daily life in a world that fosters community and help, but also benefits the big guys, those in charge, the muscles and the mob bosses, who often end up pressing those communities under their boot for profit, for land, for glory, or because they feel like it.
So that could apply to like multiple things.
Mm-hmm.
Any of the SNK fighters, Double Dragon, Streets of Rage, Final Fight, just kind of like we were discussing earlier.
Mm-hmm. Yep. The characters also have rough edges, and this game is designed to have party dynamics that aren't just we're allies in mind. Play this up. I.e., you can't really do the you all meet in a tavern because everybody's a member of the city. Then it goes, why is it about brawls? Well, because you're not going to stand by as the powerful get to do as they please free of consequence. Oh. This is, in terms of mechanics, everyone in your group is a capable fighter. You're able to punch people good, or kick, or stab. Or all three. This is done with a focus on throwing people into stuff, as well as easy to understand statuses. This part of the game is meant to emulate the feeling of watching a movie. You're also part of it. Go throw someone out of a window. Yeah, there is often that. Oh. Did I ever tell you about the Flying Dragon Tavern?
No, you have not.
It is called that because if you cannot pay the tab, that is what happens to you. Every time it has been introduced, there is a gag of the entrance sign looking like it's barely taped together, and somebody breaking right through it again. No, it's called the Flying Dragon because people end up flying their way out of it. But I know I bring it up a lot, but I'm once again going to bring up the book Blowing Up the Movies. Good book, is a really good research material about emulating cinematics within TTRPGs. And they go into a bit of the inspirations. Now, when it comes to songs, I'll have to listen to these on my own time just to, because it isn't exactly the playlist I would have had personally, but I could be wrong on that front. When it comes to video games, first off, I like that they made it look like an N64 cartridge here. Even if it does kind of mess with the format a little bit on the page thing. But the video games they bring up are the Ryoga Gotoku or Yakuza series, which I can go with that, with the exception of any of the Kasuga games. Not that those are bad games, they're just a different energy.
Yeah. They're a far more slapstick than the rest of the games in the Yakuza series.
Mm-hmm. Which I know some people were aghast. I know some people were aghast at Kasuga, but I'm like, aside from in between moments, where else are you going to take Kiryu's story?
Yeah, especially considering where he is now. And for those who haven't played any of the games or follow the story, I won't spoil it here.
Mm-hmm. But I'd also throw in the Judgment games, also known as Judge Eyes.
Those games are good too.
Mm-hmm. And in a few years, maybe I'll throw in whatever RGG Studio is going to be doing with Virtua Fighter, which is certainly going to be interesting. especially since Virtua Fighter as a 3D fighter is where Angels fear to tread because it is probably the most technical, and there's some weird ass things you have to do with controller input.
Oh yes, especially if you played DOA 4.
Uh,
Oh wait, we're talking Virtua Fighter. Never
Yeah.
mind. God, I haven't played Virtua Fighter since 1, and that was in the arcade a long time ago.
yeah, I've played my fair share.
I play a lot of Dead or Alive, but I've seen some of the technical stuff you have to do in Virtua Fighter. It's ridiculous.
Mm. And a similar thing can apply with Tekken sometimes. Though if I want to really make someone salty, I just have them go through the King combo.
In which game?
Um, any of the last few Tekkens where you have King doing chain holds.
So from 3 on.
Yep. Of course, with 3, I could always make people salty by just picking Eddie. And in fact,
Yeah.
we'd have a rule that if you picked Eddie, the odd job rule comes into play.
Yep.
But of course, Judgment and Lost Judgment are brought up in this as well. I'd also be remiss if I didn't bring up the time the Ryuga Gotoku studio did a Fist of the North Star game.
Yep. I have that one on PS4, and I might run it in the future.
Yep. But also Fights in Tight Spaces, which is actually a pretty good game, as well as its sequel, Nights in Tight Spaces. It is a card-based beat 'em up that focuses on tight spaces, where spacing is very, very much key, as well as utilizing the environment. There's a lot of techniques that involve forced movement or repositioning.
Mm-hmm. At least it's not one-finger death punch.
No, although I do like that.
I do too.
Mm-hmm. And they mentioned various beat 'em ups, the formative one being the Power Rangers one for the SNES.
Great fucking game.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely loved it growing up.
If I wanted to throw a curveball when it comes to talking about SNES era fighters, I could, or beat 'em ups, I could bring up the Sailor Moon one.
Never played that one.
It was actually pretty good. Oh. But of course, the Power Rangers one for the SNES is, well, it on some levels turned out better than the movie.
Yes, yes, it did.
If only because
I don't know, the movie
Fox
one wasn't that bad either.
The movie was good in spite of itself because Fox had no idea what they were doing.
Mm-hmm. Not to mention those frickin' suits had to cost a fortune.
Well, Fox was very good at throwing money around.
Yep.
But when it comes to movies and shows, they bring up The Raid, which, you know what, fair. Bring up all of the John Wick movies.
I've only seen up to 3, but yes, I can see that, and I do love the John Wick movies.
Yep. I know Saber Interactive is doing a John Wick game, which Saber Interactive has been pretty damn busy lately. I wonder how far that Turok project is.
Well, we'll just have to wait and see.
Yep. There were a few John Wick video games that, or at least adjacent ones that were pretty good. There was John Wick Hex, which was decent, even though there were long stretches where all you could do was wait. Which I'd like to be able to recommend it, but unfortunately you can't get it legit anymore because, license expired. There was also the VR game Chronicles, but it's a it's a VR game. It's ass. But the big one is Suit for Hire. Even though even though Suit for Hire has its issues, and I will admit a bit of bias because of my love for twin stick shooty, although it does have an over the shoulder option. It's Suit for Hire is probably the closest anyone's gotten, because trying to approach John Wick as if it's a straight up third person shooter would be kind of missing the point.
Mm-mm.
Those-
With the way John Wick is, that would not work at all.
There is one game on the PS2 that I think carries that spirit, though. Rise to Honor.
The Jet Li game?
Yeah.
Good lord, I haven't heard of that in years.
I've seen a lot of people say that the whole attack using the stick doesn't provide the right feedback. It is
I
one of
disagree.
those things that is clearly built for you being outnumbered. And I think it would be an appropriate reference for something like this, because I think I have a feeling that when we get into some of the mechanics, this game is going to be built around you being outnumbered, no matter how big the party is. Because, well, mooks have to come in waves and die in waves. But
Yep.
they bring up Scott Pilgrim, the comics and animated series 2. I will disagree on the animated series. Takes Off was shit.
Only seen the movie. The movie was fine for what it was.
It was fine. It was in production while the comic was being finished.
Mhm.
Now the game versions of Scott Pilgrim, those have been great. But
Yeah, I've seen those.
the animated series Scott Pilgrim Takes Off, which decides to do a bait and switch and have it focus on Ramona, was not the right call. I know O'Malley tried to defend it, but and yes, people are well aware that Scott is kind of a dick who needs to grow. But throwing him to the wayside to focus on Ramona was not the right call. It is in that same vein as say Netflix Witcher putting way too much focus on Yennefer and Ciri, or the post World's End Pirates of the Caribbean movies that place so much emphasis on Jack. Don't get me wrong, I love Jack Sparrow to death, but a character like that doesn't really work on their own. You know, they are going to be someone who needs a straight man to bounce off of.
Mm-hmm.
Like, as much as I like Han Solo doesn't work as well if he doesn't have Luke Skywalker around. You get my drift?
Right. Yep.
They also bring up the brother's son, which, yeah, I definitely enjoyed. I'd also bring up the movie The Protector, if for nothing else, for that scene.
Where he's just climbing the freaking tower, just beating the shit out of everyone in his way.
Yeah, once in one long-ass take with no camera cuts that goes for 17 minutes.
I've seen that. That's wonderful, but I've seen it with where King of Fighters clips were dubbed in.
Mm-hmm. Or the audio from King of Fighters was dubbed in, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That was some funny shit.
Yeah. But as far as TTRPGs, they bring up Shadowrun 5th Edition, which they say is not a good game. I would disagree. But that,
Which is weird because I have of the Shadowrun books, I only have mostly 4th edition. I think I have the 5th edition core book, but that's about it.
5th edition introduced the priority system. It also tried to make things a little bit easier when it came to getting groups of skills. But I looked at it as a case of it really shows that the massive skill list had to get pared down, which it was in 6th. And everybody but me hated it. I liked
Fair.
6. I liked the fact that it used Edge as kind of a momentum system instead of the usual extra effort that you end up hoarding. I enjoyed the fact that they kept that. The way hacking in Astral worked or the Matrix worked. Still not the best, but the problem is, and this is the reason why a lot of hacking systems in Cyberpunk games don't quite hit the mark, is treating it as a separate thing. This inevitably results in a duet scene between the hacker and the GM, while everybody else is just sitting with their thumbs in their ass. Oh.
I guess that's the reason most people hate Deckers.
Now, I am of the opinion that a proper way to do it is, instead of making this lengthy scene when you're just overcoming a door, we've, in the last few years, seen hackers who are able to bring their hacking aspects to combat, for instance, and I think that works a lot better. You kind of have that with netrunners in Cyberpunk.
I was going to bring that up.
I also saw that as hacking as another form of attack in things like Infinity or the Vault or Subversion. The key thing is that the hacker isn't separate from the rest of the sandbox.
So kind of like how they did it in Shadowrun Returns, where when it came to the Decker's turn, it just switched to a whole other screen because you were in the Matrix.
Yeah. It used to be even worse in 3rd edition, and somewhat in 4th. You had whole separate initiative tracks for the Matrix and for the Astral.
Ugh. Imagine having a Decker and a Mage in your party, which I don't hate Deckers, nor do I hate Mages, but dang, I never even knew that.
Of course, 4th edition had the controversy regarding the inclusion of Technomancers, about whether or not they'd end up just replacing Deckers.
From everything I've heard about a Technomancer, which is mostly from RPG horror stories, they sound pretty cool.
They were a decent idea that was underdeveloped in 4th. They're better developed with time with 5th and 6th. But then when it comes to other TTRPG inspirations, we do see Lancer, which I'm not surprised. Lancer's been influential for a lot of people. Even some people who try to force it into games that it really doesn't belong into. And whenever it comes to the notion of doing mecha in tabletop form, a lot of people bring up Lancer, but I'm like, Lancer is built for its setting and nothing else. If you're trying to do Gundam by way of Lancer, you're going to have to do so much extra work that it's not worth it. I have seen people try to do Gundam or Macross in Lancer, and it doesn't last. This is also the reason why the TTRPG for mech fans that I often recommend to folk is Battle Century G. Because being heavily inspired by Super Robot Wars, it has the highest amount of flexibility. At the same time, it's not going to be as overwhelmingly crunchy as, say, Mechton. Which Don't get me wrong, I like Mechton, but it is very much a case of it's got a bit of a higher floor.
Mhm.
You know, in that regard, it's not far removed from some Universalist games like Hero System, which Hero System will never be on this series, nor will Champions, and especially not GURPS.
The GURPS I understand because you've told me about that.
Yeah, it's tricky to do Supers systems because it'd be a lot of talking about powers. But we also see Icon, which is another massive press project that is leaning more into Gestalt fantasy. It is a decent game. It is not Lancer meets fantasy. We already have that in the form of Beacon. And they also bring up Blades in the Dark, and not just for using clocks, but also action rating and the way rolls work. Though I don't classify SOAR as a Forged in the Dark game, because, well, this game doesn't. Let's see, and then they go into the thing about safety. As I've mentioned before, I always skip that kind of thing.
Thank God.
Although someone commented on my old video on Wild World Wrestling where I skipped over that, and they're like, I find it hard to trust the opinion of someone who insults safety tools. Except I didn't. I just said I question how effective they are. I.e., how often are they actually getting use?
And if they are getting used, how often are they abused?
Mm-hmm. But then we go into core tone guidelines, talking about change and society. The idea being unchanging causes friction. Murder is not the default solution. Basically that no matter how much people get their ass kicked, permanent death is not going to be common. It is a very video game logic thing, but I'm fine with that. Whenever it comes to character death, I've always taken the approach of it should only happen when it makes dramatic sense.
Like that one guy in Chapter 1 of Yakuza 0 getting kicked out the window.
Mm-hmm.
After getting his head slammed into a fucking urinal.
What, you've never given somebody a swirly?
Not to the point where it breaks the damn porcelain.
It's weak-ass porcelain. It's like when I ended up giving a send-off to to that one printer, and my buddy's like, "Do you have to keep breaking my bats?" And I said, "Do you have to keep bringing me bats that are breakable?" He had brought 5 bats for the thing. I broke all of them. In my defense, everybody was getting 7 years of frustration out of their system when it came to this damn printer. But then we have the streets are characters, which, yeah, the city itself should be a character. Much in the way...
Oh god, we're gonna have to fight the floor?
The floor!
No, not unless you're a Dragoon in Final Fantasy XIV.
Yes, but we don't talk about the floor tanks.
But then we get into how things are going to work. I know it says you need at least 3 people, but I've always had 4 as the minimum magic number when it comes to setting up a table. Like 4 players and a GM. But
Fair.
here
That's pretty standard for me too.
Yeah, the GM name is The City. Now, for players, SOAR requires D10s and a handful of D6, but it works better if everyone has a few D6 and D10 each. You might want to
Luckily, I
get
got a
some.
huge bag of dice for that.
You might want to get some battle maps, either a square grid or using a VTT, as well as enough paper to track clocks and character sheets. Most VTTs will have a way to track these, which is fair. Which is fair, I would say. Then we get to your character and character creation. Some of the stuff for character creation we will get into more detail a little ways into it, but obviously the first episode in these kind of things are always a bit light, because it's setting the tone. It is the overture. But your character is made of your stat and skills, how capable, competent, or lucky you are to certain things. Your turmoil, what drives you and makes you struggle internally. Your harm and stress, you start with 24 harm and 8 stress, as well as armor, defense, and speed determined by your style. Your wealth, this is used to determine what money you have available to buy various pieces of equipment and items. You cannot lend it, and it does not come back on its own. You have to seek it out. Wealth is an abstraction. It does not represent a discrete amount of money, and it can be used to represent various types of money. It can also be shared between players. I've always preferred a abstract monetary rather than using hard numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Because for one, it opens up the door to bartering, but also trying to track individual money like that, whether it be gil, whether it be euro dollars or new yen or whatnot, leads when it comes to trying to get more mundane equipment, it ends up making things unrealistic in ways that weren't intended.
Yeah.
Like I remember one game that had it that a claymore was 20 pounds. Like, claymores are not that heavy. It was trying to do weight limits, but it had a bunch of equipment that was either too light or too heavy for what it was. Plus, that sort of management is something that a minority of people are going to be engaging in.
Mm-hmm.
And here's where I'd make the joke about the 5 foot of rope, or the 10-foot pole that you supposedly need to bring in, even though nobody's going to tell you. But then we have spotlight tokens. These are gained by invoking negative quirks and spent to use positive quirks. You can only have a maximum of 3 at most. You can't get less than 0. You can only spend tokens for positive quirks if you have enough to do so. I do hope that there are going to be limits to that, because I wouldn't want somebody to just abuse all of their negative quirks and be that guy just so that they can get the tokens.
Yeah.
Of course, it's going to be dependent on how negative quirks can be, and truth be told, if it's one of those minor negative quirks, those ones are ones that, unless it significantly comes up and adds drama, shouldn't be getting tokens. At the same time, you don't want to have negative quirks that just end up being a anchor on everyone else.
Yep. Hence the that guy thing.
Mm-hmm. Then we have gear. You have 1 gear slot to begin with, but it can be used to equip a number of different things. The most common one is armor types, which that certainly fits the source material. You aren't going to be switching around weapons that you pick up. If you pick up a pipe, you're using that pipe until it breaks.
Yep.
See, temporary buff. This is where you'll type in buffs that you get from eating somewhere, They last until you properly rest or finish a brawl. You only have room for 1 brawl and 1 slash of life buff.
Oh, so we're invoking River City Ransom with this?
Looks like. Let's
Yeah.
see. Items, you can carry 2. They can be used in a brawl and often have a limited amount of uses. Alright, fair. Key items. Gifts, flowers, decoration for your house. You can only actively carry 3 of those, but you can have any number stocked up. They just won't come up for narrative or brawls, which is already the case for most key items.
Oh, I can't just walk down the street with my new couch and just beat someone to death with it?
No, but knowing me, this is where I'd have my home defense cannon. But now to make a new character, you pick a playbook, which will determine your starting stats as well as what skills you start with a point in. Note down the playbook's feature. You pick a major and a minor positive quirk, as well as a major and minor negative quirk. You start with 2 spotlight tokens. You get a +1 to 1 other stat, as well as a +1 to 2 skills. These have to be different than the ones you get from your playbook, so you can't double down. This is essentially your freebie. You note your turmoil and the 2 values that come with it. Gain 2 wealth, which you can't use yet. Then pick a starting stance and style. You gain all the default stance ability and 1 style abilities. And yeah, it is funny that there's this brief summary of character creation, and some of the stuff we'll get into as we go further in. But so far, it's pretty straightforward in terms of its introduction. I feel like a lot of this is just setting the tone for what Slash of Life is meant to be.
Seems very, very silly, but in a very fun way.
Mm-hmm. And what I also notice is making it very clear what it is and isn't. Because one of the big lies that a lot of people in the tabletop space like to tell each other, some of you will try and deny it, but I know better, is that any game can run anything. This is not true, and anyone who claims that it is blowing smoke. A individual game is more often than not going to be on something specific. But I realized that was a bit light. So before we get into the Slash of Life part of things, because that was what I had set up. Let me check a small thing. Okay. So we will take a break for a quick minute while I set up the Slash of Life segment. So I will see you in a couple minutes.
Yeah.
are back, ladies and gentlemen.
Yay!
Huzzah.
And Mario says a buddy once took his office to a gun range. He brought his 50 cal, the office printer, and 5 pounds of tannerite. I hope
Oh shit!
That's a lot of tannerite. Just make sure you stay quite clear of that, so you don't catch strays. I've seen what happens when some people underestimate tannerite and nearly get clipped by a door or something. Splash zone is what I'm saying. Anyway, so with Slash of Life, actions are resolved by 2 forms. First, you're establishing how you're doing it, either picking a skill and noting down the stat associated with it, and then the roll itself. The attempt, which is a d10 roll versus the difficulty. Depending on how difficult the task is, you'll need to meet or beat a certain number. Call the difficulty value. Stats give you a modifier to the roll. So 3 to 4 is easy, 5 is a regular, 6 is challenging, 7 and 8 is a difficult one. And if you roll a 1, it is always a failure. Then the success, where you're rolling multiple d6s. If the target number has been beat or met, then you would roll a number of d6 equal to your relevant skill and keep the highest one to see what kind of success potency you get, with a critical effect happening if you roll a 6 twice in the same pool. All skills start at 1 by default. So if it's a 1 to 2, it's a weak success. On a 3 to 4, a normal success. On a 5 to 6, a strong success. And if you get 2 6s, it is a critical. This is also represented on the clocks by 1, 2, 3, or 4 segments. And if you get a critical success, you also recover 1 stress. Now, in the game, NPCs do not roll outside of combat to represent their actions, use these successes at a cost, or make circumstances more or less difficult. So we have the degree of success and the success itself.
Yep.
I can see how this is going to work. I do have a feeling some people won't be fans of you could roll high on the d10 and roll low on the ladder. But it is what you essentially have here is divorcing the yes or no for the success as well as the degree of success. I do think that there could be a way to have one bleed into the other. I wouldn't do it as a straight 1-to-1 bonus, though. Potentially just instead of modifying the d6 roll, possibly just adding more. If you get over a certain amount, I'd have to think it over. But a failed attempt gives consequences. A weak success is success with consequence. A normal success gives what you asked for and a consequence. And a strong or critical success gives you more than you'd hoped and no consequences. This is the powered by the Apocalypse / Blaze in the Dark approach of no and yes and. Damage dealt as consequences is always AP to prevent specific styles from being necessarily better at taking them. So with minor consequences, it could be minor harm, which is 1 AP of damage. Things get worse, a clock gets filled, or if you're using a relationship clock, take it down by 1 segment. Normal consequences would be regular harm, or 2 segments, or getting called out, or marking 1 stress. Major consequences could be 3 AP damage or 4 AP damage. Ouch. But I do like that they make it clear what the consequences are, because I've seen some by the Apocalypse adjacent games that don't, or just say, "Oh, the GM and the players are savvy enough to figure it out," or it's part of the story to figure that out, which is just cope.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to using stress in Slash of Life, you can use your internal strife, which is 1 to 3 stress. When you roll an attempt that matches one of your key actions in your turmoil values, you can use your internal strife, adding +1 to your d10 for each stress spent. You may do this after seeing the result. After the roll, shift your turmoil towards the corresponding value. You can push at 2 stress. When you roll to see which profile you'll be using 1 success roll after seeing the result, you may push a success, upgrading it to the next level. So a weak success can become a normal, a strong can become a critical. So here's your extra effort part of it. And of course, then it does go into clocks, which I remember Notepad saying he really doesn't like clocks. I'm neutral on the matter. It's just a tool.
Never really used clocks, so I can't really say one way or another.
Yep. The most common one is relationship clocks, which you have in 6 segments, a minor clock, 8 segments, a regular clock, or 10 to 12 segments, a major one.
Mm-hmm.
You can potentially lock parts of it with a barrier. Which, if you do that, then the segment can't go past that point. And of course, you do have the relationship between loyal, enemy, hostile, neutral, or friendly. The status of the thing. An NPC is neutral when the clock is half full, friendly when it's filled 3/4 of the way, loyal when completely filled, hostile when 1/4 of the way, and below that, an enemy. That's a good way to use the position of clocks in a way so so it matters more than just whether or not it's full or not. And of course, if you're doing structured play, that requires a time clock with 4, 6, or 8 segments. This represents time passing and how much time can pass before something happens. We'll get back to that when we get to structured play later in the series.
Interesting.
Then the 4 stats. Stats start at 0, skills start at 1. So I see how it's set up. The stat and then its associated skills. So cleverness has street smart and book smart. Expertise has precise and sustained. I do like that they put in why they don't have a strength stat. Indeed, a lot of general endurance is covered by inner fire. This is because I firmly believe SOAR works better when it doesn't have a punch good skill or stat. Here, your strength is measured by your ability to be passionate and how you externalize it. I'd say that's fine. I mean, I don't miss some spot checks for similar reasons. And Mario, I can understand why they hated that printer. But presence is how there you are, and has the skills charm and command. And inner fire represents raw emotional power, how much you're willing to push yourself, and can represent stoke or control, how good you're good at rallying yourself up, and how good you are at keeping things in check. But then we have the turmoil stat, which is represented by 2 numbers which have a name dictated by the playbook you pick. These are called values. They influence one another and usually represent an inner conflict you have. Both of these start at 0 and are linked. You gain +1 in one, you lose 1 in another, and vice versa. Your values act as an attempt modifier and help you constitute your D6 pool for successes. Instead of rolling a stat or skill, you may roll a value, but you need to spend 1 stress in order to do so. A value can go into the negatives. In those cases, when you attempt to use the value for success, roll 2d6 and keep the lowest one. And you can also be called out on a value. And hang on, we've got a... Oh, and Zeri already took care of the bot.
Huzzah!
When you're called out on your values,
Didn't
you
get
must
your
roll
sweet potato.
you must roll a d10 with that value as a modifier against difficulty 5. If you roll above or meet it, you're compelled to listen to whatever you're called out on. Whoever called you out on those, if not in their way, then a way that fits the value you were called out on. If you roll under, their words do not reach you, or you're able to shrug them off. You may call out NPCs on their ethos. When you do so, you gain a +1 to your attempt roll and success roll if you manage to name their ethos. Which the whole thing of if you roll high, you end up having to listen. I'm not 100% sure how I feel about that. I can see what it's trying to do. Basically, having it that values are a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
But sometimes you will note that you did something in accordance to one of your values, and if you did, then mention that you're adding +1 to said value and recover 1 stress. Although I do like the scales representation for turmoil here. But if you go above 3 in either value, you go overboard. You exit the scene by doing something dramatic in accordance to said value, or do something bold and dangerous that fits it. You then go to 0 in that turmoil value and add +1 for each time you went overboard in that specific value to see where it starts again. If this causes you to need to go to +4, you permanently stay at +4 in that value, but lose the other value forever. You've made your choice about where you stand in the world.
I'm not sure how I feel about that either. I get why it's there, but I don't know.
I'm
Being
guessing
stuck
it's...
on one value permanently? I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah, the whole going overboard thing, that part I can get. Although, exiting a scene because of that, that's a bit iffy.
Yeah, it seems a bit, I don't know, just to be taken out like that, that's kind of, doesn't seem right.
Mm-hmm. But then we have NPCs and ethos, their equivalent of turmoil, which is a sentence that defines an NPC in their view of the world that may change over time. You can attempt to name said ethos, and if you get close enough to it, you get +1 to your attempt and success rolls against them when opposing them or trying to get them to agree with you. But then we have the playbooks proper, the first one being the hunted. You're on someone's wanted list, work out with the city what it is, it has to be a group or faction you cannot face alone. So they get cleverness +2, as well as +1 in street smart and control, as well as the wanted feature. You have a wanted bar that can represent as a 12-segment clock. Every 4 segments, some wanted event happens. So now or in the future, a group of thugs is going to find you, and it's likely going to come to blows. Until you face or deal with this group of thugs that was sent after you, you cannot tick more segments on this clock. You fill up 1 segment at the end of every session, and another one if you went out of your way to be recognized. When you fill a wanted event section, you gain the following. Either some info about the person who wants you out of the picture, or 3 wealth. Once you fill all sections, you're allowed to go up against the important person that keeps sending goons after you and your people. If you don't, they're going to keep sending people after you. Empty the bar after it's resolved. When you've completed the bar, you can either retire your character and make a new one, or pick a new adversary you've pissed off. There's always a bigger fish.
They'll come at you out of nowhere, and they'll keep coming at you, as long as you continue to do that.
But you also gain ambush predator. If a regular person knows you're being hunted, gain +1 on attempts and successes against them. In any brawl involving your adversary, you can spend 3 stress to ambush them, and take a turn before anyone else in the fight. This doesn't count as your turn for the first round. So even though you're a wanted man, you could be hunter or hunted, which is part of the turmoil and values. You can either prey or hunter. Which is fair.
Mm-hmm.
But then we have the suit. You used to be someone dangerous, but that was a while ago. You're trying to change your life, get something new going on, but the tug of the old way is always present.
Okay, John Wick.
Mm-hmm.
Or Kazuma Kiryu.
Yep. So whenever you meet someone from the underworld, roll a d6. On a 4 or higher, they know you and treat you accordingly. This isn't always a good thing. Maybe you meet a rival assassin who hates your guts. Or you meet somebody like Zero, or you meet someone like Zero who's a fanboy of you. See, first impressions matter. Whenever you meet an NPC with a relationship clock for the first time, roll a d6. On a 4 or higher, they think you're quite scary or otherwise fearsome. You gain +1 attempts and success rolls with them, but they immediately lose 2 segments. You can suppress this by spending 2 stress after seeing the result. I love this little comic here of him very dramatically cutting carrots.
I knew Goro Majima once had a mop top like that.
Let's see, torn between 2 halves. You start play with an additional style and 1 ability from it. Each of your styles represents one of your ways. They do not have to be from the same stance, but if they are, you may switch between them as a free action at the start of your turn. And their turmoil is old ways and new ways. Which is fair. See, and then we have the boss. That has presence +2 and has charm and precise +1. Has the Den of Greed feature. You own a business, describe what you sell, why it's shady, where it is, and why it's not simple or safe. Any D10 roll you make within your Den of Greed has a +1. You know the place, after all. You have a Book of Customers. The bonus for it applies to any D10 roll that you make with them, regardless of them being in your Den of Greed or not. To be in a situation of power over a customer, spend 1 wealth on them while making a deal with them in your business. Also, when you get a proper rest, you can work or oversee your Den of Greed, but it takes time. Make a relevant attempt roll, and if it succeeds, a success roll, and gain wealth according to your success level. If you fail, you don't get any, shifting your turmoil towards people instead. The turmoil and values are profit and people. But then we have the Oathbound. You've sworn an oath to a group that is not beyond using violence. You serve the interests of said group, even if your ideals may clash with it. So you get +2 to inner fire and +1 to stoke and sustained. The feature you get is the oath you are bound to. You're entrusted with 2 duties to carry out for your group, and you pick from the list here. You also have your ideals, which can be either protect the innocent, never start a fight, never use position for your own gain, never turn down a request for health. You would put a check mark on duties fulfilled and ideals lived up to. If you manage to tick 3 or more in total, at the end of the current session, gain 2 wealth and remove the check marks.
Although the ideals kind of run counter to, or at least one of the ideals runs counter to the oath, which is never start a fight, but hey, you have to antagonize enemies of your group.
Which, inner turmoil is certainly a big theme here.
Mm-hmm.
And in their case, the turmoil is between duty and freedom. You're basically living up to the oath, or whether or not there's something more for you. And something I've noticed is that some of the turmoil and values have some sort of stat modifier, and some are more narrative. We've seen, like, this one definitely does have the stat setup, and others were more of a narrative thing. Then we have the investigator. You're in the business of knowing people.
It's a reference to Kiryu's dragon style.
Mm-hmm. So, okay, this is a bit odd. Instead of a +2, you get 2 +1s in stats, but you're still getting 2 +1s when it comes to skills. With each of the other ones we've seen so far, it's +2 to a stat and +1 to 2 skills. But your feature is Ace Detective, which starts off with you getting your office. You also have an assistant, which has a regular relationship clock with 4 segments full. The assistant cannot help you in brawls, but can otherwise follow you around. And an eye for details lets you ask a question to the GM for free. Or you can declare that you're investigating someone after asking the first question, only one person at a time. So the investigator effectively has the hint button in the old Sierra games. The turmoil is between results, i.e. getting results, and connection. Which definitely fits the detective approach.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a nice little image to represent connection with like 5 different lighters at once.
Yep.
But then the master. You spend a fair bit of your life learning how to fight and deciding it was now the time to teach others. Why am I thinking of Stick from Daredevil? For better or worse, you are set in your ways. So +2 to expertise and
Leroy from Tekken 8, it looks like, at least from the silhouette here.
Yep. So stats can be expertise and presence 2. Again, that bit of oddness. Skills are sustained and command +2. So you start with 3 style abilities instead of 1. You have a teaching ground, a place where you can teach people how to fight. People know where it is and know you teach. Sometimes you might have someone visit your teaching grounds. And as a teacher, you have a few students. You can only have 3 at a time. Each student has a relationship clock of 8 segments, starting at 4, as well as an experience clock, 6 segments that starts at 0. You start with 2 students, When a student fills their experience clock, you can declare that you've taught them all that you know and earn 2 wealth, removing them from your list of students. When a student has an empty relationship clock, remove them from your list of students and mark them as a rival. They'll be hostile towards your dojo and come by routinely to attack you until you make amends. You know, the whole I've come back to challenge you in your own dojo kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Okay, Starscream, get kicked.
When you take a proper rest, you can either look for a new student or teach one of your students, but only one at a time. When you teach one of your students, you describe the lesson and roll the appropriate stat and skill like you would for any other role. The target number for the attempt depends on the relationship clock with that student. If it's hostile, 7, but you fill 1 segment on a success. Neutral, 6. Friendly, 5. But you fill -1 segment on a success. Loyal, 4, but -1 segment on a success. On a success, fill out the segments of the experience clock appropriate to the level of success. If you do not teach a student twice in a row, remove 1 segment from their experience clock and 1 segment from their relationship clock. Which I'm trying to figure out why if they're more loyal, a success causes that loyalty to go down, to not get as many. Like I'm
not sure why that is.
It's an odd decision. If it's there to provide turmoil, I feel like there's a more elegant way to do it. Or if it's there because, well, if the student is loyal to you, then there's no conflict. Either that, or it's supposed to reflect the whole set in your own ways. But I'm not quite sure that works. Then we have advice goes a long way. So when you're trying to help someone learn a style ability, a stat, or a skill you know, it costs them -1 wealth to do so. If you're helping them learn a style or ability, you shift your turmoil towards excellence. If a stat or a skill, shift it towards compassion. If both at the same time, you shift the turmoil towards the value you want. And we have old dog. You have a hard time learning. Any improvement costs +1 wealth for you. If your excellence value isn't in the positives, learning any improvement instead costs 2 wealth. And the turmoil and values are experience and excellence and compassion, which certainly fits the old teacher approach. But some of the advancement when it came to teaching your students, I'm not quite sure it fits, or at the very least, it seems to disincentivize doing well.
Yeah. That's an odd design choice, especially for what is essentially a class for this.
Yeah. Then we have the facade. Your main source of income requires you to be someone that is not you. Your veil is known by people, but your face isn't. You get +1 to inner fire and presence, and +1 to control and charm. You have the feature of the face behind the veil, i.e. what your job is, how you separate it from your regular life. And when using the face, people don't know who you are, for better or worse. You're always treated as if you had a neutral clock towards you. When using the veil, people will recognize you, and you can't really move around unnoticed. But when you're leveraging the veil, you gain a +1 to attempts and succeeds. But when an NPC removes segments from their clock, they remove an additional segment. For every day you spend fully as your veil...
I don't like that at all.
For every day you spend fully as your veil, mark 2 stress but gain 3 wealth.
So the average VTuber got it.
You can code switch, basically flip between your veil and your face so long as you have private time somewhere. And your turmoil and values are fame and care. Care being self-care, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
But then we have the Disruptor.
That was a good game. I don't care what anyone says.
You're never known for going with the flow. People have either learned to love you or hate you for it. Your craft is the vessel for your soul. So I'm immediately thinking of some of the cast of Jet Set Radio with that description. And you are basically a rebel artist with this approach. Starting with the work. Your craft is both a stat and a skill, which starts at 1. You cannot upgrade it in the usual manner. Instead, you get better at it through practice. So what we effectively have is the starving artist approach here. When you show someone a result of your craft, they witness on their own, or they witness it on their own, sorry. You roll 1d6 plus craft. The higher the result, the more in awe of the craft they are. Your turmoil is self-reliance and community. Which I feel like some of these playbooks will be easier to grasp once the artwork here parts are better set up. But then we have the Scarred. You are defined by the things you keep with you. Your metaphorical or physical back is proof of that. You have a lot of scars. Not all of them are physical in nature, but they're about the mark that they leave and how you interact with them. A scar is a 4-segment clock starting at 0. Whenever it would be relevant to an action, take -1 on the attempt and -1 on the success. If you still succeed, mark 1 segment on the scar clock. If it's a failure and you take it, you instead mark 2. You can spend 2 segments from the scar, clearing them, and instead gain +1 on the attempt and success roll if it's relevant to a roll you're making. You can have a maximum of 3 scars at a time. If you do not have room for a scar, you cannot elect to take one.
I like SCAR systems. They're fun.
Mm-hmm.
Like SCAR and the other kinds of systems like that.
Mm-hmm. But you can spend stress to mark a scar. You can, whenever you do a rest, you can spend 2 stress to keep scars. They weigh heavy on you, or remove them and recover 2 stress and harm, as your head is clearer for now. But you also have a special scar that's referred to as the big one, a more permanent one. This is a 6-segment clock. It doesn't impose penalties, and it can't be pushed through. It can't be moved on from. It doesn't cost stress to keep it on your back either. Instead, at the end of each session, you mark 1 segment and an additional one that if you moved on from a scar, pushed through a scar, or got a new one. When it is filled, the scar comes knocking at the start of the next session. And you either spend 4 stress, 6 wealth, or take 6 harm. And maybe it's just me, but I feel like some elements of the Scarred is not far moved from the Wanted.
Except with far more severe consequences in this case.
Mm-hmm. But the turmoil values are vulnerability and protection. And before we get into the quirks, I will note with the playbooks, I get what it's doing, but I feel like there's a bit of skewing with some of the numbers. Like I really feel like the stat modifiers should have been somewhat universal in terms of how much they're affecting. But we've got some that have a bigger effect and some that have a lesser one.
Yeah, and some of the lower end ones I don't foresee many people playing.
Mm-hmm.
Even some of the higher end ones.
The other thing that I noticed was each one playing out kind of like a character arc, which is definitely fits playbooks, but that's going to be a double-edged sword because a big flaw when it comes to playbooks is someone may come in with a particular character concept that doesn't necessarily fit one of the playbooks. Or in some cases could fit multiple ones. When I covered Wild World Wrestling, which uses Powered by the Apocalypse for its playbook system, I had brought up the fact that you have multiple wrestlers in various companies that embody different styles. There's quite a few that are both high flyers and technicals, for example. But the way the playbooks worked in that, I'm not sure if they fixed this in 2nd edition, is you'd have to pick one or the other. You'd have to either be a high flyer or a technician. And when there's so many people who do both, I'm not sure that's the right call. And I could see a similar thing with the playbooks here. I don't hate playbooks, but I feel like some of the character arc parts of it maybe should have been separated from the stats and features as some sort of baggage phase. I think that might alleviate that problem a little bit. It's not going to fully fix it, but it'll at least lessen the blow. But that's my take on the playbook system. What about you?
Like I said, I feel like a lot of the different playbooks will be played more than others.
Mm-hmm.
Especially considering the I feel like with the Scarred and I feel like with the Scarred and the Facade, it feels like there's a lot more disadvantages to playing those than there are others.
Mm-hmm.
Which have more ill effect than, say, like the Investigator, which seems to have like the most benefits from what we've seen.
Oh yeah. But then Mario says, wait, high flyer technician, not both? Did this person not study old school lucha? They probably did, but it's a case of the design of playbooks.
I think I'm gonna agree with Sick on like this. The Scarred, for example, we would really only play something like that if you have some kind of specific idea of like role playing idea in mind, rather than like it if they, which I mean, that's what you're supposed to do, but it'd be like it's I don't know, it feels more story based than I think that they would be going for, if that makes any sense. Like versus like the Investigator and stuff, and the pretty much any of the other ones that I was looking at. But like, I sorry, I haven't been quiet. I'm not feeling good. But it felt like the Scarred, although I like the concept of the Scarred the most, it
Mhm.
also felt like it would be like not the best.
Yeah. But characters start with, when it comes to quirks, characters start with one major positive, one minor positive, one minor negative, and one major negative and one minor negative. Quirks interact with spotlight tokens, which we've already covered. If you play into your negative quirks, you get spotlight tokens, which you spend on using your positive quirks. And I can see what this is I guess the difference between them is minor positive quirks take one spotlight token, major ones take, I was going to say take 3, but there's some that take 2. So it's a little bit all over the place. And that same kind of thing seems to apply with the major and minor negative quirks, where the amount that you get from that isn't consistent across that whole category. And I feel like that's going to be a recurring thing we see throughout this, is an issue of consistency. But that is going to cover what we have for this week. So as far as the introduction and the slash of life part, what do you think so far?
I mean, there have been good things and bad things that I've liked about it. Like, I'm not sure how I feel about the clocks, but then again, I've never really used clocks in games, so. And I feel like with a lot of the playbooks, I feel like there's a lot more, clocks to some rather than others.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, I'm not even sure. I feel like there's a lot more drawbacks to some of the playbooks than there are to others, especially considering that if you go overboard in something, you can basically more or less permanently screw yourself. Not sure I like that very much.
I get the sense that the turmoil of values thing is to reinforce the whole the fact that everybody has some degree of baggage. Much in the same way as the relationship between humanity and the beast in Vampire.
Yeah.
However, I'm not a big fan of any sort of countdown that could result in permanent character loss like that. Or even just exiting a scene because the wrong move was made at a certain point. I think it's enough of a punishment that you end up leaning really well into one and leaning terribly into the other. Now, I am a little bit more amenable to it now that we have the context of the individual turmoils with each playbook. But this does demonstrate the positives and the negatives of the playbook system in games like Blaze in the Dark or Powered by the Apocalypse.
Yeah.
Some of this we may end up revisiting once we get to how styles work in the Brawl next week. But I feel like the big word that is going to be a recurring thing throughout our assessment of SOAR is consistency.
Yeah.
And this might be a minor thing, but maybe at some point in the future, if a revision is done, I would potentially suggest having some representatives. I.e., what characters in different fiction would be a good representative of that particular playbook. Like, I can see some parallels, but it's going to be a different energy if it's outright stated.
Yeah.
But overall, a decent start. But there's definitely some rough patches. I mean, this is still a play test.
Yeah. So I can't really expect, absolute perfection, but
Mm-mm.
maybe maybe we'll see some better stuff down the line. We'll see.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. But with that said, I will be back here on Sunday for both Fated Continuum and then later on the Emergency Valley of the Judge covering 7th Sea 3rd Edition's playtest release.
Oh.
And since Sizer and I have a long history with 7th Sea, it's going to be him and I for that one.
Nice.
So that should be an interesting thing to delve into. But until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra. I am your gaming monk. Stay fucking frosty, everybody.
See you on the trail.
Take care.